if you work super hard and establish your brand, doors open up to amazing opportunity.
There's nothing like a TCC podcast, man.
Okay, so hi everyone. Today we're here with Julie Bainbridge, Global Head of Customer Operations for Qualtrics. When we got the call to have Julie, of course, we had to have her on our podcast. On the first episode, I think we said that we had no compromises, so we would have had guests on our couch. But for Julie, we came here in the office with the mics, and of course, I forgot the third mic. That's why Dan and I are recording with a shared one. But thanks for being here, Julie. It's a pleasure to have you, and we'll try to make it worth it, this episode. First of all, if you could give us a little bit about yourself and an introduction on like your career and overall like your personality, yourself. I know that you work for PayPal, Amazon, Uber, nowadays with Qualtrics, so great companies and at such a great level. So everyone is interested probably in hearing more about that.
Oh, thank you. And thank you both for having me. I'm super excited to be here. So look, I'll give you the cliff notes of, sort of how my career got started, which has been a really interesting path. But like, I've had the type of career where it just keeps getting better and better. And I feel like I have gotten lucky, but also it's come from a lot of really hard work and leaning into opportunities where they may not be apparent, but it was really clear that there was something special there. So when if I sort of go back to uni, when I was graduating with a criminal justice degree. And I had really been excited about thinking about going into like the FBI or the CIA. That's really where my heart was. And I'm a big true crime lover, and sort of that's a big passion of mine. But as I was getting ready to graduate, there was a hiring freeze. Unless you spoke like Arabic or Farsi or had some really unique language skill, then it was sort of the doors were closed. And so I talked to a lot of people to say, well, what could a different path in look like? So people said, look, the FBI hires a lot of people that either come with a legal degree or an accounting degree. So I'm terrible at math. So I said, okay, let me look into, sort of this legal path in. So I started applying to different law schools. I never had great grades, to be honest, in college. I was more of a social person. I loved meeting people and doing new things and having new experiences. In fact, and most people in the U.S., they graduate college in 4 years. I was having so much fun. I stayed for 6 years, and then finally it was like, okay, probably gotta, turn the page and move to the next chapter of life. But I loved the college experience. Anyway, started applying to law school, and I found a program that was right up my alley. It was in New York, and it was with New York Law School, and you could do a program where you got experience in the public sector while you were going to school. And I thought, this is perfect, right? Because I'll get to, really get experience out in the world while I'm learning. And it also worked out really nicely because when I got to New York, I was in California, sort of grew up there, went to school there. When I got to New York, even though I had been advised by many people how expensive it is, I was like, I am in trouble. I was super broke for many years of my life. Like I tell people, I used to wake up in the morning and think like, what can I sell? I was like super broke. And so I went to, in our school, they had like a work study program. So I was looking like, where can I go work and make some money? And there was a job opening at City Hall. And I was like, what? This is amazing, right? Work at City Hall, right, with the mayor, and then, sort of
Pretty
law
young at the
school.
time, right?
Yeah, oh, I was right out of uni. And so I went to apply because you have to apply, even though it was sort of like a paid internship type of deal. And when I went and they said, okay, let me tell you about the job. And they said, your job will be to come at 4 a.m. and you get all the newspapers and you cut out any article about the mayor and then you sort of paste them into what's like a digest. And you make copies and then you put them on the mayor's desk and all the deputy mayors, and then you can sort of go off to school. And I was like, that is amazing. And so that was my job, like for the first year, right? Like I would show up like at City Hall at 4 in the morning, and that was my job. And like I got to talk to like, the police that were there and the mayor's like staff and his chief of staff who would come in really early in the morning and get things ready. Anyways, long story short is I worked super hard, and one opportunity led to another. So like I left that and I got to work in the press office. Then after working in the press office, I got to work in the research office. And I was like, I love this, like working with people. And like there was always like intense things going on in New York City. And so even though I was going to graduate with a law degree, I knew my path was not going to be a law firm, right? And so at the time I was working for Rudy Giuliani. He was the mayor. And what happened was he decided to run for Senate. And so because I had worked really, really hard and like established a good brand, I was one of the people that got to come on his Senate campaign. And it was, again, it was such a cool opportunity. And I never would have gotten that unless people knew, right, that I was willing to work really hard for like next to nothing. But again, it's all a path, right? So then worked on that, got a lot of really experience. And then after sort of his Senate campaign, I did say I want to get into the private sector and get that experience on my resume. And then that's what led me to PayPal. When I went to PayPal we did some interviews, it was the greatest experience because of my law degree, I was hired to work in the legal and compliance area. But my first day of work, I'll never forget it, when I joined, they said, hey, we know we hired you to work in sort of legal and compliance, but we need you to do something totally different. And I was like, all right, what is it? Like, this is exciting. And they said, we want you to go to all the high-risk industries and figure out how PayPal can basically be a payment option. So gambling, pornography, like pharmaceuticals, they called it the 7 deadly sins. I was like, this is the best job ever, right? So I actually, at the time, even though I was working at their headquarters in San Jose, California, I got to fly out to this part of the world, right? And I was meeting with like Betfair and like all of the different gambling houses and all the adult merchants. And my job was to figure out how to enable payments for all of those, right? And so as we started growing our business in a really controlled, smart way, right, with age verification and all of these others, like how you would mitigate risk in a high-risk industry, then PayPal started growing their business internationally. And I was like, this is amazing, right? And because after spending so much time like in EMEA, I was like, I would love to live abroad, right? So I went back to the US and I told my manager at the time, I said, I want to do like a living abroad experience. And he's like, okay. He's like, well, let's keep our eye open and see what comes up, right? Let's just figure it out together. So like, I was continuing my job, doing work and loving the job.
Back in the US.
Back in the US, yeah. And one day I was coming up from the first floor from lunch, coming up the elevator to go back to my desk. And there was a couple of my colleagues in there from the finance team. And they were saying, we're opening up our new international headquarters in Singapore, and we just need 14 warm bodies for like tax purposes. I was like, I can do that. I can be a warm body. So I immediately went to my manager and I said, his name was Joe. I said, Joe, this is it. This is the opportunity, right? And he said, okay. He said, write out a business case, put together why you should be chosen to go over to Singapore and start this office. And we'll take it to, at the time, his boss was the general counsel. We'll see what he says. So I did a lot of research, right? And I was like, going over to Asia, there's going to be all sorts of new risks, like counterfeit goods and different things we have to learn about and pay attention to as we grow their business. I put together this business case. I presented it, and it was approved. So I remember going home like to my family and I was like, I know this is going to sound wild, but I'm moving to Singapore. And they were like, what? You're moving to Asia? This is so incredible. So there was like 14 of us. They were all friends and colleagues working at PayPal in San Jose. We moved over at the same time to Singapore. We got this little shop house in Chinatown. Actually had a key. I've never in my life worked in an office with like a real key. And we started the Asia business, literally with like 14 of us. And like we would fly to China and like have those meetings. We would go to Thailand and Indonesia and Malaysia. We were down in India, and it was just this amazing experience of just growing a business. And like we were just all of us wore every single hat, right? Doing a ton of different things. I loved it, right? And had a great experience with the colleagues there. I stayed for like 8 years, and I was still doing my job. And I get a call one day from Amazon. And Amazon's, look, they're like, we don't even have a job description, but can you come do what you did there? Can you come do it for us? Because they had just opened up their marketplace, and they were getting flooded with all sorts of not safe products and counterfeit and all the rest of it.
In
And
Singapore, the job. Amazon.
this was the job for Amazon was back in the U.S. in Seattle.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
And so I was like, gosh, I'm really happy in Singapore, but this would be amazing for the career. So I flew back out, right, to the U.S., set up shop, and had a very couple of really good, successful years working at Amazon, built big programs, brought a bunch of people from PayPal, so on and so forth. Then went back to Singapore, really missed Asia, realized that I had not been ready to leave there, went back. My original manager, this is an important one, my original manager at PayPal, he had moved on to Uber. And he was like, hey, if you want to come back to Asia, I'm leading a role at Uber now. He's like, come join my team. And I was like, because I had such a good relationship with him, it didn't even matter what job it was. I was like, working for you? Done. Where do I sign? Right? So then I went to work for him, stayed there, had a great career there. Uber left because it got too competitive with Grab, who's the local ride-sharing company.
Yeah.
So long story short, I went back to PayPal. And again, why was I able to go back to PayPal? Because I had a really established a good brand, right? I'd worked really hard. And so when I said, hey, Uber's leaving Singapore, is there any roles open? The managing director at the time, he just said, just come. He said, just come back. We'll figure out what for you to do. So there's sort of a moral threaded in here, and that is, if you work super hard and establish your brand, doors open up to amazing opportunities, right? Now, when the pandemic hit, right, and sort of things got closed down, it obviously was, I think, an important time of reflection for everybody. And I had been like away from my family for a long time. My parents are not getting any younger. So I was like, I definitely want to get back stateside to be closer to family. And then this amazing opportunity with Qualtrics opened up, and they were looking for someone that had international experience. And so it was just a perfect fit, and that's how I got to where I am today.
Wow.
Just
Yeah.
so
This is
inspiring.
insane.
Yeah.
I would listen to this 50
Yeah,
more
yeah,
minutes
yeah,
if
you
you
can
want
keep
to
going.
keep it.
Wow.
I think the first question I have there, the one I'm most interested to know is, you clearly, if I ask you what the formula is for you to get where you are at right now, for you, one of the main factors would be hard work.
Without question. Number one, and you can't fake that. You can't fake that. It is table stakes for opening up opportunities, and your brand as well.
Even if when you were getting paid basically nothing, as you said, when cutting out the pictures, everything, you were still building your brand.
100%.
And back then, that's how you saw it?
Yeah.
That's why because you mentioned you got very excited when you got this job.
Yeah. Yeah, and that, you have to do what you love. And I'm a big believer, there's a philosophy or a school of thought, if you will, of like, if you do what you love, the money will follow. I'm a big believer on that, right? Because like going back to like when I was like interested in sort of criminal justice and law and the public sector, working at City Hall, you could have paid me nothing. I would have been like, this is amazing, right? Like walking up the steps of City Hall in the morning, and I was like, who gets to do this? This is so amazing. Every opportunity that I've had, whether there's been any like, real money there, it's just been like this is incredible experience. And like, as far as we know, I think you get like one life, and you might as well like really enjoy it and get the most out of it. So, but as I've done that, obviously, you move up the ladder and get, sort of get compensated and the rest of it. But like still today, I think if you ask most people that know me, I'm the first one in the office and usually the last one to go home. And that's always been my brand. always. Now there's probably been some sacrifices to that, right? Just because of that, like I've been so passionate about my work and probably very honestly, probably didn't spend enough time making sure there was a little bit more balance early on. I've never been married. I have a dog who I love, who's like, my dog kid. I'm perfectly happy that, but like that's not a lifestyle for everyone. So I think if I had to do it over again, I may have put a little bit more balance on, finding and investing in a partner to sort of like have that part of life, right? Again, like sort of no regrets, but like there probably was a little bit too much like on the career side is compared to family
Yeah,
and
it
stuff.
sounds like really superhuman, like the accomplishment that you have, and the back and forth between countries and the success that you generated in every company you went. And do you think that you would have achieved the same success if you had all of the different things more spread out?
Yeah, I tell this a lot when to sort of younger colleagues, right? Like to make sure that they have the balance because you can have it all, right? Look at the CEO of our company. Look at the CEO of other Fortune 500 companies. They have really great success, right? Amazing family life, amazing hobbies. Many of them have like many different like interests, right? And time that they devote part of their time to. You can have it all, but it has to be intentional, right? Like you have to carve out time and be very intentional, right? My where I fell down is I never carved that out of my schedule, right? And that was a miss. I should have done that, right? Because I don't think it would have changed my trajectory. I don't think it would have changed what I did, right? I think it just would have led to a much more sort of balanced life, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Because at the time you were not thinking, you were
I
all
didn't
in.
think, I didn't have someone at my shoulder saying, Julie, right, like you got to carve out more time, right, to go like have a partner, right? And I would date and stuff like that. But there is a window, right? Like when you're in school and in uni and when you're in those first years of your career where like, you're single and you're meeting and greeting and the rest of it, that's to the time to sort of find someone. And that doesn't mean you have to get married and a formal commitment then. But once you leave that period and then your colleagues and your peers and people all start getting married, it becomes much harder to actually like meet someone who you're like is going to be a life partner. And of course there's a bunch of apps and people successfully meet like really great people on that. But that's the advice I give when I see younger versions of me. I'm like, don't take my path. Yeah, don't take my path. To take a more balanced part because you can have it all.
Because later, if you try to find a partner later, build a family there, since it's harder, it might also affect your career a little bit.
It's much, much harder, right? Like, but mostly because, and this is just my experience, everyone's a little bit different. If I think about the relationships that I had in the past, they were never ones where like I met someone for the first time and I'm like, wow, I like you, you like me. It was like you were around them a lot. You were interacting. You know how it goes. All of a sudden you're like, right? Wow, they're not so bad. But when you miss that, uni time or like the work time where you're spending a lot of time getting to know someone's personality and funny or witty or shared hobbies, meeting someone for that first time, it's really hard to have, you know what I mean? That you may think they're attractive or oh, we share similar interests in reading or whatever, but that real connection becomes very hard. It's more in that sort of zone, if that makes sense.
It's also interesting because you mentioned being highly sociable when
Yeah.
you were in university, and you're shine off as a really sociable person. Even now that you're like top executive,
Yeah.
I wouldn't imagine a top executive to be this sociable.
Yeah.
Usually, the stereotype is strict, rigid, strong. You would say, and I'm wondering if you were always like this. Also, when you were like working at the mayor's office, waking up at 4 a.m.,
Yeah.
even before 4 a.m., you were starting at 4 a.m.
Yeah.
So, did your personality change with time, or you stayed the same and remained as really funny and really easy to engage person?
It's a great question. So I have always been like this. It's one of the reasons why I think um, I've had some success is because I would establish relationships and be able to pick up the phone, right? When something was going wrong with either a customer or a regulator or, fill in the blank, where other people would say, "What do we do?" I know John. Let me call him, right? Right? Like, I would just have a very, very big network of just people that I would meet and then meet more people. It winds up being a bit of a multiplier. So I was always really over indexed in like relationships. It's what I like. Um, there are areas where I'm really not good at, right? Things like PowerPoint presentations, math, things like that, right? That's where I'm like, ask
Didn't
other
work in
people to come in.
consultancy.
Yes, exactly. But it's so interesting to me. Usually, when you see things go wrong, whether it's like in a company, in an interaction with people that you're working with, in politics, it feels like most of the time it comes down a breakdown in the relationship, right? And if more investment could happen with relationships, getting to know people, right, and finding where there's commonalities, it helps you motor through the tricky times. My probably one of my closest friends, we disagree on everything. Like we're opposite sides of politics, opposite sides of he's never on time. I like to be on time, just everything. But we like we like each other. We have a good relationship, so we're able to get through things where normally there might be conflict. We worked together for years. That's how we sort of became friends. But yeah, it's really about, I think, relationship building. And it's so funny to me when I see things not go well. It's usually a breakdown in the relationship.
Listening to your story about the jobs you gave us, all the roles you've had, I see that maybe the job was not the best to most people,
Yeah,
but for you, what I see is like you make it to be the best.
yeah.
Like we share a philosophy. But do you read books? 'Cause,
Yes,
we're a lot into stoicism,
yes.
and
We're gonna start with Marcus
no,
Aurelius.
but I see
Yeah.
totally where this job. When you talked about it, I would
Yeah.
have thought you would have said it was horrible, but you said and it was the best.
Yeah.
But it's not about the job being the best; it's that you made it to be the best.
Yeah,
And that's what I've been hearing you constantly about all the roles
definitely.
you've had.
Oh, definitely. Like there were so many times in my career when it was like, "Hey, who wants to go, to Indonesia, right? And go like sort out some really like hairy stuff." Everyone's like, "No, thank you." And I'm like, "That sounds amazing." Right? So I definitely yeah, I find really different and complicated and even sort of, I would say, high risk things. I find that really energizing because it's like problems to go solve.
Do you think that has been key in your life? And if it were not key, do you still think you could have arrived where you're at without that
Definitely
mentality?
not. Definitely not, right? Because like I think especially like when you're starting off, you're at the bottom of the totem pole, right? You're not gonna get the plum assignments, right? Like I always sort of am a little bit puzzled when I see sort of juniors come in and they'll say, "I want to do strategy," right? Like it's like, yeah, there's probably a few steps on the train before that, right? Like you got to put in the work. You got to put in the work. And I will share with you when, like, I think it was like last year or so when, like, we couldn't hire fast enough, right? It was just like trying to, like, get as many people on board with the growth that we were having. And I was interviewing a lot of sort of the people coming in the door. I would ask, hey, like, tell me about your part-time job. When people said, oh, I never worked, right? Like, that didn't mean sort of the interview came to an end, but I was much more attracted to people who said, yeah, like, I worked, after school, I worked down at the local shop. Or I'll never forget one guy because I was like, oh, you're going to be really good here. He said, my job, he said, I do have a part-time school to help sort of fund college. He said, at night when it's cool, I go out and pave roads, right? And I was like, you are a hard worker. And he was smart too, super smart, hard worker, very pleasant, right? And I'm like, you are going to go places, right? I look for grit. I look for people. I don't look at like which university you went to, what your degree is. I look for grit, people who are like work hard and are smart and also get along well with people. I have seen a lot in my career where you'll see a case of someone who's like super smart, super smart, but they're so toxic to people around them, they're not worth it. They're just simply not worth it, right? And I think sometimes people can make the mistake on like what's truly important, right? Like when you're going out in the world. And I'll share with you when I hadn't started working yet, but I remember I was out to dinner with my mom and one of my mom's buddies from work, and I was asking them. I said, when you're interviewing people, you're hiring. What do you look for, right? Is it like the degree or, and they said, no. Like my mom's friend said, am I going to be able to get along with this person? And I said, that's what you think about? And she's like, yeah, I'm going to work like 8 to 12 hours a day with this person. We gotta get on.
That'd be nice.
We gotta get along with each other. We gotta like be able to work hard and enjoy it, and come back and do it over again, day in and day out. And I was like, wow, like I would have never thought that, right? But it's funny as you go in your career, you look for those things, right? Because like you got big challenges ahead, and you got to be able to lock arms with people you work with. Forget titles and exact roles and the rest of it. But you got to lock arms and be able to go crush down mountains and things like that.
And Julie, sorry, for personal development, you mentioned working hard, and then also working on your brand, which is really interesting.
Yep.
We don't hear it that often. But I was thinking regarding strategy. I take a lot from my father, for instance. He taught me since I was really young to think step by step.
Yeah.
So never think about the marathon, which might be weird.
Yeah.
But just because it creates anxiety, you want to overwork yourself maybe sometimes. I'm wondering if when you were working in mayor's office or even nowadays, what's your strategy? How do you apply? Like myself, probably I think about, okay, I have a review, trying to exceed the expectations for that one. Then I'm going to think about promotions, and I'm going to think about the other thing. So I have really small steps rather than thinking, oh, I'm going to be a top executive. I just trust the process and believe that by doing hard work, I'm going to arrive there.
Yeah.
But do you have a different take? Or
I think
philosophy?
that's spot on. The only thing that I would add on there, which is one of those ones where it's really easy to say and much harder to do, is to stay focused. It is so easy, I think, especially in the world we live in today, to get distracted. There's distractions at work, there's distractions outside of work, there's distractions in the world, and it is just so easy to let your mind share. Just get distracted with things and not stay focused, right? And that was a piece of advice I got early on.
Yeah.
And so I just stay super focused and blaze a trail to the goal. And when I hear no, I just keep going. And when I hear no again, I just keep going. And I just keep building and getting things done. And a lot of times I see people fall down because they'll get distracted. It's like, oh, we're going through a transformation, we're reorganizing, and then they sit on the sidelines. They sit on the fence and they wait. No, right? I mean, you heard a couple of our leaders talk about it the other day. Get busy, right? We all know what needs to be done. Start doing work, start working with your colleagues and get things done. And that's really, really important. And that will distinguish you from the pack, for sure.
Wow. And of course, you are a global leader.
Yeah.
And probably the next question is about routine.
Yeah.
Because you got to coordinate 3 regions. You got APAC, you got North America, you got EMEA.
Yeah.
What I'm thinking is, how's your routine, if you can share something about that?
Yeah.
Right now, for instance, we're in Dublin.
Yeah.
And you're heading back to Provo, Utah.
Yeah.
So freaks out with your body clock probably and all that. Then you're going to have meetings, everything. Is that hard? Or did you figure it out with time, how to manage your day and all that time management skill?
It's a great question. I think, look, I have a lot of experience under my belt at this point working in global roles, right? Like when I was in Singapore and just even before that, just having to work with a global schedule, right? And the key comes down to just, sort of ruthless prioritization and really, really strict organization. And so those are the things that I find as mechanisms to be able to do a lot and keep it just super focused and organized. yeah, those are the two things that I would share on that point.
You think with experience, for example, now if I have a meeting, I prepare a lot, but with experience, you have to prepare way less for a meeting, so you can have a very busy day, but just arrive to the meeting without preparing as much as
Yeah.
when you had less experience.
It's a good look. It's a good question. I think what I've sort of learned over time is you have to, and it does sort of tie to the prioritization, but you have to sort of measure um, whatever it is, whether it's an event or a meeting or a conversation. You have to sort of measure that with sort of the preparation and the energy and time you put into it, right? There are certain things where they don't really require a lot of preparation, right? And knowing what sort of those things are. There are other things where you don't want to get it wrong, right? You really don't want to get it wrong. And those are ones where, like, when I talk to my leaders, I'm like, let's get it right when it really matters. If there's other things where we sort of stumble, right, or we have a little bit of like a sloppy deck, or there's some things that maybe weren't fully like polished or buttoned up. If we make sure that when it really counts, right, that we show up in gold medal there, that's what's important, right? And then I think even within that last bucket of like getting it right, and this was a learning from Amazon that sort of is one of their most important tenets is being careful of one-way doors. So there's sometimes where like, hey, you make an error or whatever. Like think about like if you go pick up, like your dry cleaning and it's not ready. Oh, who cares? I'll come back tomorrow or whenever it's ready, right? But think about sort of like one of our customers where they're relying on us for something really important. And if we fail, it's a fail to their customers or it's a fail to them professionally. That's a one-way door. If we go out it, we may never see them again. So it's really important to be able to identify what those one-way doors look like and then even prioritize them further, if that makes sense. But yeah, like you can't prepare for everything and do everything for the same, right? Otherwise you would just be buried and you wouldn't be able to get a whole lot done.
We've been watching entrepreneurs and high executives lately. If you look online, they all have these super long routines of like ones wake up at 5 and they get their red light, shower, then they do a cold plunge and they meditate for half an hour. Super long routines where they spend 3 hours doing that and they can start the day because they say they're more productive. That is a new school of thought, but there's also the old school of thought of I just wake up at breakfast and start working, and these 3 hours I would spend on cold plunging, I just work. Do you have a specific routine that helps you focus, or are you more of the old kind of school of thought?
That's funny. Yeah, like I am definitely not the wake up and like, do yoga and make like a green juice, right? Like I wake up sort of already dialed up pretty high. So what I do is take the dog for a walk and then I get rolling for the day. But like when my day's done, I come home, I turn the laptop down, I make myself a nice vodka soda, and then turn on the news. I like to catch up on what's happening around the world, and then sort of that's when I sort of get a chance to sort of come down, and then I may go for a run or I may sort of hop on with a friend depending on what it is. People that know me know I'm a massive basketball fan. So that gets prioritized.
Utah Jazz?
So favorite team is Golden State Warriors, but then also the Utah Jazz is sort of right there.
Obviously.
But yeah, so then I prioritize like what I like to do. But I never consider like it's like when you're on work or off work. Like for me, like if I can handle like an escalation or something real quick, just on my phone while I'm like watching the news or I'm at a game, quick sort of text message here and there, done. But I do really, and this is important for like me and my team, is to make sure that like evening times and weekends, unless it really can't wait, unless it really, really can't wait, to really safeguard that time. And one of the nice things about having a global team is you can pass the baton, right? So when I hear people like, oh, well, we're going to have to like stay late or go early, then I think, okay, well then I'm not doing something right or my leadership's team's not doing something right, because we should be able to pass the baton so that everyone has, protected sort of family time or weekend time.
Since you have the 3 different regions, they can pass it to the
Totally.
next region, then they invest in the
Totally.
next region.
Yeah.
right? And then you
Yeah.
have where in those departments where on-call is needed, right? It's a mechanism that most multinational tech companies use. Super easy. And yeah, like there's no reason why anyone should be having to do something unnatural to, to do our work because we have such a big global team.
We're going towards the end of the episode. Sorry, Dan. One last question.
Just wanted to ask about that winding down time.
Yeah.
Do you, for example, if I ask myself, I think I can go without it. However, I know that I should have it. Do you think it's essential for the long term to have that winding down time every day, or usual winding down time, or is not as essential?
Look, everyone
you.
is different. Everyone is different, has got to sort of figure out their own sort of mojo and like what works. For me, I have to intentionally stop thinking about work, right? And it's not good, right? But I think our brains are wired to just keep going. And like, it used to be worse about this when I was younger, but I would analyze things over and over and over again. And I'm like, okay, this is ridiculous, right? Like, so I really like to, just again, sort of like I make my evening cocktail, turn on the news, and that's my time to I stop thinking about work and I sort of listen to what's happening in the world. And I also find that really grounding because I don't know about you both, but like I find it's really easy to get caught up in your own world, right? And you're like, what are we going to do, right? This is, a step one, or this is really tough. But then when you sort of open up, sort of the eyes to what's happening in the world, it's like, you know what, there are bigger problems out there, and we will be open for business tomorrow, and we will figure things out. And like, really, some of the bigger things that are happening in the world deserve more attention, and sort of, about that sort of balance and reaction to, sort of measured reactions to sort of what exactly like happening type of thing, right? Like one of the things that's frustrating for me is when I watch the news and I see the type of stuff that's talked about where I'm like, this is, right, why don't we spend more time talking about, education and healthcare and the world and stuff like that? And we're worried about things that are not in those categories. I find that really frustrating, and I think you can get sort of caught up in things that are not like bigger picture, more meaningful for all of us, really. Society, right?
Yeah.
Right. It's super easy to get caught up.
100%. Even with the podcast, we're gonna have my sister over. She's a teacher.
Oh,
She's talking about
lovely.
the educational system. Yeah. So I totally agree with that. Before wrapping up the
Yeah.
episode, just a question out of curiosity.
Yeah.
You worked in Singapore and in the US.
Yeah.
What's the main difference in the working culture between the two?
Great question. So Singapore is very much rule followers, right? Very.
We've been there.
We've been
there
last
last
year.
September.
Okay, so
Traveling all the time.
you know how it is, right? And there is a lot of wonderful things that come out of like things are done orderly, things are done right, very specifically, very, very, very strong law and order. There's a lot of goodness that comes out of that. Like, and I love, love, love Singapore. But one of the things as we were trying to build businesses over there, one of the things that was a struggle for a lot of the talent was to think out of the box, think creatively, right? Because it was like, you're not encouraged to do that from a very young age. You're conform, stay right, like in the lines. So really good, and again, sort of math and accounting and things like that. But like when it came to, okay, we want to go launch the business in Malaysia, or we want to go launch in Sri Lanka, what do we do? It was like, where do we have a playbook? We don't have a playbook. How would we even think about that? And I think one of the things about the US is like really instilling like thinking creatively and innovation and out of the box and all of that. And I think so both of those are very different cultures and different worlds, and both have pros and cons. So it's very interesting.
Wow. Well, thank you so much, Julie.
Yeah,
for
thank
the
you so much for
conversation.
having me.
This was actually really amazing. I'd say 40 minutes, but of deep information. I'm going to re-listen to it a couple of times, most likely. And then...
Last question.
Yeah.
To get where you are at, what's the one thing you would recommend someone to have? Some type of attitude, some type of
I would say build your network and never stop doing that. The more people that you can build relationships with and establish those, and it's not a matter of just meeting someone and like connecting with them on LinkedIn. You have to foster the relationship. Hey, right? Like I saw, that you were in town, or like I ran into someone who I think you would be enjoy meeting. I cannot tell you how many times, just because of sort of building a network, when things come up, whether it's a job or a project or something special, hey, I know Julie from this person, this person, this person, and I do it myself. I refer and connect people all the time. And those people that like my peers, my friends, in fact, my good buddy who I talked about earlier, super, super smart guy, but he never invested in building his network, right? And so while like all sorts of opportunities were sort of opening up, right? He was like, how is this happening for you? And I was like, you got to go meet people and expand your network. The more that you can do that, the more things you will be surprised, the things that open up. That's the number one piece of advice. That, and then work hard.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Super inspiring.
Oh my God.
Thank you for doing
Thank
this,
you.
Julie. We really appreciate
I'm
it.
really happy about this episode.
Absolutely. Well, thanks again, and
Thank you.
really appreciate it.
Yeah. And thank
Okay.
you guys for listening. Bye.
Bye.